Welcome to Weekly News Review, program where we look on the events of last week in Europe and beyond. I'm your host Martin. Today we are covering the week of 26th January to the 1st of February 2026. Let's have a look what's out there. Gold high. Gold prices this week hit a record high, with the price of $5,100 per ounce on Monday morning. Analysts expect further growth and possibly the price reaching $6,000 by the end of the year. This rise is driven by two factors: unpredictability of US policies, as well as by the fact that China was heavily buying gold in last 14 months. This uncertainty motivates investors to seek the safety of gold. It is interesting to observe how, in the time of crisis, people do historically save gold as an investment. It is necessary to note that golden standard was abandoned in 20th century in most Western countries. Later in the week, there was a correction where price of all precious metals dropped. Trade deal between India and EU. A historical EU-India trade agreement was signed on Tuesday. European Union Commission Vice President Kaja Kallas and Foreign Minister of India Jai Shankar, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and the European Council President Antonio Costa attended the signing ceremony at the Hyderabad House in New Delhi. This deal will gradually decrease tariffs imposed by both sides. EU will primarily benefit from tariff cuts on cars, which will slash from 110 to 10% over a 5-year period. For EU alcoholic drinks, the import tax will drop from 150 to 75% immediately, and then gradually to 20% for wines and 40% for spirits. India's textile products, chemicals, rubber, base materials, gems, and jewelry will be eventually zero tax. This is the second big deal the EU signed in January. The first one was with the Mercosur bloc gathering South American countries. This deal was much more controversial, especially in France, where the French farmers were concerned that the cheap meat from South America will flood the European market, what led to eventual protest by these farmers. The concern is that South American producers will be The concern is that the South American producers will be much more competitive since they don't have to adhere to strict environmental regulations as in Europe. As I see it, this question is relevant in case of India as well, whose environmental record is more than questionable. Israel recovered the body of the last hostage held in Gaza. Does this mean the US brokered truce will move to the next phase? On Monday, the Israeli government announced that it recovered the last body of a hostage held in Gaza. The name of the victim was Ran Kvili, at 24 years old. He was one of the police officers fighting the brutal attack by Hamas on the 7th of October 2023. This event is closely monitored since the return of all hostages is a condition for opening of the Rafah border crossing between Gaza and Egypt. According to the US brokered deal between Hamas, Palestinian Authority and Israel, the Israeli government reopened the Rafah border crossing on Sunday in a pilot stage, and 50 patients and their escort were able to cross from Gaza to Egypt for treatment. The pilot phase tests coordination between Israeli, Egyptian, and EU officials who facilitate the crossing. As of the next Monday, 2nd February 2026, the number of people able to leave Gaza to Egypt will increase to 200 per day. and 50 people will be able to return back home to Gaza per day. Israel announced strict security controls in both directions, and the crossing is open for people on foot only. The start of the next second phase is disarming Hamas and handing over the ruling of Gaza Strip from Hamas to Palestinian Authority. The implementation of a second phase might crumble, however, since the willingness of Hamas to be disarmed is under question. Let's now turn to Syria. On Wednesday evening, Syrian President Ahmed al-Shara met with Vladimir Putin in Kremlin. The topic of the talks, besides the relationship between Syria and Russia, was the possible extradition of former President Bashar al-Assad to Syria, as well as future of Russian military bases in Syria, which have for Russia strategic significance, since they help it to project power on the southern flank of Europe and NATO. Russia has naval bases in Tartus and an air force base in Hmeimim. Additional developments in Syria occurred on Thursday, where a Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces struck a truce deal with the government in Damascus and agreed on integration of its forces into the government structures. This decision occurred after significant loss of territory last week. The exact steps of the integrations are not clear, but the agreement was confirmed by both sides. The American envoy for Syria, Tom Barak, sees this as an opportunity for Kurds to be part of new Syria. However, Elham Ahmad, a senior Kurdish official, called on US and France to supervise the implementation of the deal, since they might be parties interested in derailing it. Who he meant is not clear. Now we turn our heads to the other side of Atlantic, to the United States, where nationwide protests occurred over the weekend as a reaction to fatal shooting of two US citizens by the federal immigration officers known as ICE. This protest included school walkouts, business walkouts, and shutdowns, as well as abstaining from shopping under slogan "Gun Support ICE." In my opinion, the importance of these protests cannot be overstated, since protests are part of democratic society and one of the basic rights, and the main opportunity to present disagreement with the government between the elections. In addition, it shows the true dissatisfaction of people with the government decision, and they can be very specific, since even today it's hard to create fake protest, since gathering of significant number of people would require funds or use of force, as it's still practiced in some regimes. The last piece of today is focused on Ukraine. On Tuesday night, a drone hit a passenger train in Kharkiv, killing 4 civilians. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky stated this is an act of terrorism. In the meantime, the ceasefire negotiations stall. People near the front lines suffer and slowly are evacuated, at least for the duration of the winter. In contrast to this, on Thursday, US President Donald Trump stated he was granted a wish by Russian President Vladimir Putin that Russia won't strike Kiev for upcoming days. This was confirmed by Kremlin on Friday, that they won't attack Kiev until 2nd of February. Kiev's voiced out willingness to stop attack Russian energy infrastructure if Russia stops first. This can be a first breakthrough in the negotiations of ceasefire between the fighting nations. However, cracks in the gesture appeared already, since Ukraine expects it to last the whole upcoming week. That would be the week of 2nd to 8th of February. much longer than what Kremlin has announced. Next round of peace talks is expected to take place on the 4th and 5th of February in Abu Dhabi. However, these talks will be overshadowed by the attack on a bus by a kamikaze drone which occurred in Dnipropetrovsk region where 12 people died on the way to work and 7 were injured on Sunday. In addition, Sunday in Zaporozhye region, maternity hospital was hit where 5 people were injured. We'll have a look on the developments of the talks in our next episode. We are nearing the end of our program, so let's go to the last entrance, to point news. News in one sentence. EU put Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard on its terrorist list due to their participation in the massacre of protesters in Iran. Human trafficker who tortured immigrants in Libya was jailed for 20 years in Netherlands. Very deep poverty in Britain hits record high, according to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation report. Norway Parliament approved $2 billion for artillery plan for long-distance artillery, similar to the system Storm Shadow. One person is already a victim to a drone strike in renewed fighting between the central government and the Tigray forces in the north of Ethiopia. Home Alone and Home Alone 2 mom, legendary actress Catherine O'Hara, died on Friday at the age of 71. Thank you very much for listening. This was our last entry. This time I included some of the links to the point news entries down in the description for the people who would be interested in further reading. You listened to the weekly news review for the week of 26th January to 1st of February 2026. Thank you very much for listening. And next, the review will be ready in a week.